This is the story of the electronic instruments that shaped modern music. Strange machines designed by nutty professors whose quirky bleeps and hums came to rock our world.
Good evening.
The font of all weirdy noises is the Mini Moog, or Moog if you're an anorak. Favoured in the 70s by Pink Floyd and Roxy Music, it became the last word in having a cool wooden box on stage. Designed by Robert Moog, Moog, it became an overnight success. But the dawn of Moog experimentation was the king of prog rock, Wakeman. Now he appears on Countdown.
This is my love of my life. Not this actual particular one, because this is borrowed, but I've got 3 that are the love of my life. I used to have 9, but 6 of them were nicked. That ain't one of them, unfortunately.
It's a great machine for generating bass synthy sounds, for electronic blips, for certain signs of cutting lead lines. It's an instrument. You get the best out of it from actually playing it from a keyboard. So people like me, not so brilliant necessarily, we define Moog as makes odd orgasmic groans.
There's no doubting what a sexy mother it is. Check out that walnut panelling.
The thing about the Mini Moog, it was the first thing that was actually portable that people could take on stage with them. When you had Moogs before, it's like this enormous, great monolith where you're sort of taking plugs out and plugging it back in.
Hopefully, in theory, if I do that. So this is the sound source, so you can change the pitch there.
The Mini Moog actually was, you've got this like, keyboard in a little cabinet you could wheel on stage. So if you're anyone from Roxy Music to the JBs, you could add that bit of modernity into your sound.
And then the sound goes into the filter, and I can change the brightness.
Sort of kills off the theatricality a bit though, doesn't it? Because when somebody's on stage and they look like they're working at a telephone exchange with all the plugs and all the rest of it, it was never been seen before.
Sort of things like people like Tonto's Expanding Headband, when they were working on things like Innovisions for Stevie Wonder. You got Stevie Wonder there, and then you've got these sort of 2 hippies sort of working on this enormous power station.
Here's Keith Emerson, giving it some serious welly on his very own power station. The Mini Moog sought to get rid of such unwieldy machines, but gave the prog rockers new problems all of its own.
And they suffered very badly from picking up RF, radio frequencies, anywhere you played, which used to happen a lot on early pedals in the 70s. Like if you pressed a pedal down and you were in a building that had aerials on the roof, you get the local taxi firm, the local cable company, all that sort of junk. And the best one I ever had was at Crystal Palace Bowl with Yes, when we were doing Close to the Edge, and I put my foot pedal down, and it was exactly 5 o'clock on a Saturday, and we got football results. It's great. So we all copied them down for 3 minutes and then started playing. Bob Moog came and saw the show, and it was at half-time, and he came into the dressing room. Bob's a wonderful character, really wonderful guy, and he said, and I told him about this RF problem before, and he said, I can hear your problem. He said, it is bad, isn't it? I said, yeah. I said, it's almost unplayable. You ended up trying to work with one oscillator or something like that. So he said, I've got an idea. Can I just go up on stage? We used to have curtains in front of the stage. It's Maple Leaf Garden. There's 26,000 people, whatever it was. And he went up on stage during the interval, and we were having a long break, half hour or whatever. We went to go back on stage, and the opening music's playing for the second half. The curtains are closed. I went up there, and he'd got my 2 Mini Moogs that I used to totally in pieces on top of the piano. I had a grand piano there. They're just all in pieces. And I said, Bob, we're starting now. And he went, know what it is? And the curtains open, and it's one of the only times that we ever played on stage, yes, where there was a 6-piece on stage, because Bob didn't go, he just stayed there. And you can see like 26,000 people going, who's the grey-haired geezer with the curly hair? What's he doing? And I think it was John who just went up and said, oh, the man who brought synthesizers to the world of rock and roll, this is Dr. Bob Moog. And the place went potty. And he suddenly realised that he wasn't just a sort of an icon for us musicians, but for the kids at the time. He was just like a hero.
Most of the kind of like deep techno guys, the real bald head techno guys, fetishize the Moog because it is the original thing. It's like, like the campaign for Real Ale, only about electronic instruments. there's this kind of fetishism of that it produces the real electronic sound as opposed to digital stuff. So I think that's the thing that it really has given to the world of electronic music. You see Moog on T-shirts. It's become I know it's a mark of quality and a mark of authenticity.
What else can you do? And this, and this, and this, plus that, and that, and those lot over there can all be connected.
I think the thing about the Moog in general, about Mini Moog, is it's just pure funk. Those are the sounds that it creates. I mean, in striving to create some sort of approximation of real instruments, you're ending up with these incredibly dirty, filthy, sleazy, sort of synthesized sounds. If you listen to records like Blow Your Head by the JBs, it's just this, when you first heard that record, or when you heard it sampled on first Public Enemy record, you're just going, oh my god, what's this incredible sort of sleazy ghetto funk sound? No idea where it comes from. Maybe 10 years later you realise that's a Moog, and I think that's why people fetishise it now, is because the sounds coming out of that are otherworldly sounds that couldn't have come from any other instrument.
The great thing about it though is it's also very timeless, isn't it? It doesn't sound like a particular era, so it lends itself hugely to sampling, which is kind of missing the point, because the thing about the Moog was that it wasn't just the keyboard buttons that you operated, it was all the modulation knobs as well. So weirdly, it's actually very organic, isn't it? You can get little subtleties into it that you can't get with the digital thing, where you've just got a block of sample and maybe a bit of bend on it or whatever.
So you mix up with that?
I think if you use synthesizers, you can get incredible sounds out of them, but you just can't get that dirt, that filth. Yeah. It's like you can comparing playing a synthesizer to playing a guitar. You can't get feedback on a synthesizer, but you can sort of really rock out, and you can rock out on a Moog.
Thanks lads, but not everyone loves the Mini Moog, you know.
I think the Mini Moog is one of the single most overpriced, overrated heaps of wood and metal I've ever laid eyes on. I don't particularly like it. It can, its limitations are not that fantastic. It sort of, the Moog especially does one sound and it does it well. It's not really that variable. People love it for the bass sound you can get out of it and for the soaring lead sound that you can get out of it. Well, great, but there's stuff that you can buy that won't cost you 1,200 quid and is a hell of a lot more reliable, that will do that for you in another way itself. And I think it's kind of a bit, it's kind of a bit lazy. I think there's this sort of rich kid kind of approach to it as well from a lot of producers who sort of feel that once they've sort of started remixing and earning a bit of money, that they have to have the Mini Moog.
Pink Floyd and particularly Hawkwind, I remember, put them to good effect through all those kind of take-off space sounds that they used to have at the beginning of their tracks. But also, everybody used them. But again, these were all very expensive for a kind of the normal bloke in the street who wanted to get into electronic music. It was very difficult to do that before about 77, 78, just because the cost was so prohibitive. And that was a kind of, the Mini Moog, sorry I'm pointing there because there's a Mini Moog there, that kind of represented that kind of musical elitism of it at the time. Because there was a very dual feel in my mind anyway, and a few other people I spoke to. At one point the synthesizer was a very elitist instrument, but at the same time it had so many possibilities that people wanted to get their hands on. So there was a kind of snobism against it, which I suppose was particularly articulated by punk. Yet there are people like me and, I suppose Throbbing Gristle and Cabaret Voltaire and all my contemporaries who really wanted to get their hands on them and fuck them about, really.
Nowadays, the Mini Moog is part of the furniture, which is handy given how it looks. Still a classic bit of kit, it made a recent guest appearance on Jamiroquai's #1 hit, Deeper Underground, the theme from Godzilla. Oh well.
It did various things, the Mini Moog. One of the most important things the Mini Moog did was, for the first time, the keyboard player could do a solo and could be heard. I know it sounds really daft, but the hammered organ, I mean, it was I remember going to see bands in the 60s and things, and as soon as it came to the organ solo, everybody had to go quiet, so it could just about be heard, and it was really naff. Or if at the piano, everybody had to go really quiet, because there's the only way you could hear, and then the band kept going again. I mean, it was a guitarist's heaven. The Mini Moog will cut through concrete. It's the equivalent of the percussion player's tambourine. I mean, you can put a tambourine amongst 5,000 guitar players playing flat out, and you'll still hear the tambourine. The Mini Moog is exactly the same. Suddenly you had an instrument you could solo on. That was the greatest thing that the Moog brought to keyboards. Suddenly the keyboard player, really could be heard, and it was. I don't think Bob really realised that when he first put it all together, but nobody has ever come even remotely close to producing a solo synth sound that can do things that this can do.
I love vocoders. I think they're fantastic. They've sort of, yeah, they've, from, if nothing more than just the fun of aping your favourite science fiction programs, like Battlestar Galactica. Those, the robots in there with the little bit going, but the sort of that voice. I've always loved it. I loved it in Electro.
Isn't it? It's
Electro, ELO,
again,
ELO as well. Mr. Blue Sky. I used to sit there as a child waiting for that bit to happen. It's like, And the funny thing is, something that used to scare the living daylights out of me when I was a child was Sparky, the magic piano. If that came on the radio on a Sunday, I'd just scream. I'd stand there screaming in the room. My mum and dad had to turn the radio off. This vocoded piano, it's like voice coming through the strings of a piano. Ironically now I can sit in here quite happily late at night playing with a vocoder and I don't scream.
I would have loved to have been there when the vocoder was first invented. It's a fantastically exciting sound. It's also a very bizarre sound as well. It's not just the sort of ability to make someone sound like a robot, for example, has been around for a long time before the vocoder. The sort of Metal Mickey kind of effect was had been done for years. But with a vocoder, you suddenly turn the voice into a synthesizer with it.
The children's TV theme tune Sparky's Magic Piano is often credited as the first well-known use of the voice distortion box. In fact, the first vocoder was developed by the Bell Phone Company in the 1930s and used as a scrambling device for phone calls between President Roosevelt and Churchill during the war.
I'm a king wasp, buzzing round your hive.
In the 1960s, transsexual avant-garde composer Walter, then Wendy Carlos, used one on the soundtrack to A Clockwork Orange. In 1975, avant-garde composers ELO used one on Mr. Blue Sky.
I think, like a lot of people, the first time I properly heard the vocoder would have been on ELO, would have been on Mr. Blue Sky, the vocoder solo, which was just, Mr. Blue Sky repeated through a vocoder. And, as a kid, you think this is the most amazing, unreal, weird thing you've ever heard.
Hey there, Mr. Blue, we're so pleased to be with you. Look around, see what you do. Everybody smiles at you.
And then you get a little bit older and you start to hear other people's record collections and you realise that actually it got used to death in terrible prog rock records. The great thing about it now is it's been totally reclaimed in dance music, and it's another thing that had this incredible elemental funk to it that people didn't really understand at the time, but in retrospect we can see, particularly compared to the kind of fetishizing of real sounds now, you can actually see that it was something that had an incredible character of its own. It basically just modulates the human voice and gives it that kind of Dalek groove.
The classic use of the vocoder would be to take, say, a sustained string sound as your input and then use a voice as a carrier to modulate that. I mean, you can do it the other way around, but basically you're taking the characteristics of the voice and morphing those mutating them with the characteristics of, for example, a sustained string. And that's how you get these wonderful kind of sparky, the talking piano effects. And, you know, it just is a brilliant effect to use. I think it perhaps epitomizes the marriage between human and technology that we were talking about before, because everyone likes to hear a sung line and a melody and a vocal and lyrics, but this enables you to put a techno skin onto it, if you like. Yeah, and sort of force breed them together, and the hybrids that you get out are pretty interesting.
One of the practicalities of it, he has to sort of have normally the microphone's up a bit higher, sort of Lemmy style, so the spit doesn't run down, because that's when the electrocution happens. So you have to have it that way so that the spit kind of goes back into your own mouth, which means it's probably going to need one of those suction things you have at the dentist to get this.
In New York we bought one a couple of years ago, and we went to do this show, and as we were doing the sound check for it, some spit got down the tube, must have run into the box, blew it up, there was an explosion, a smell of rotting fish. Then I could see a spark come out of there, and it went into my mouth and came out my elbow. We all get electric shocks, but
the lights are down really low. They were testing all the lights, and so this lightning, everyone just looked around, because it was just like this blue piece of lightning just came out straight into his mouth.
And I did a special body pop movement when it came out my elbow.
What's his name? Ian Curtis kind of dance, yeah. Involuntary. Mind you, his was involuntary too, wasn't it?
Electronic bands add N to X, use the vocoder as a personality in its own right.
On the new single, we use this new computer program called a vocal writer, which is it's basically a kind of strange piece of software where basically you put in the words, and then you have to kind of work out the musical pitch and notes of it, and then you can basically drag it and do whatever you want to it. But you could basically, for the first time, make computers kind of sing. And there are various kind of character voices, and the ones we use on the single is Sarah and Ralph. And Ralph is particularly lonely. And Ralph.
We've got an example of Ralph.
I've got machines.
And Sarah is...
we haven't got Sarah on here.
Haven't you got Sarah?
Oh, yes,
So I think that the kind of... What it is just that it's really sad. You've got this thing actually doing very emotive. You can get it to do very emotive human things. In other words, it's got control on it for vibrato and tremolo and pitch, and you can virtually make them kind of sing operatic.
Should I make him do it now?
Things. Yes.
The wobble.
So you can sort of do anything you want with it, but it's got this completely soulless thing, and I really like the debate within synthesizer music about what's got soul and what hasn't. And for us, we couldn't give a fuck about soul, because I don't think kind of soul necessarily exists too much in modern music.
Silly metal Mickey voices fell out of fashion, but enjoyed a comeback in the 90s thanks to the franche.
I like Air's use of vocoders. I think that's some modern music that uses the technique well. I mean, sometimes it's used in a kind of cod way. You're almost not making a proper song. You're referring purely in a pastiche sense to stuff that's gone before. But I think they straddle the divide there and get it right.
I really like the use of them at the minute. There's loads, I like vocoders, they're funny.
It's interesting because, you get Cher, that, her voice, and Posh Spice, Posh Spice's latest, her thing with...
Out of My Mind.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of what I'm just about to say, because now, the modern day, what they're using now, although it's not, it sounds a bit like a vocoder, and you go, what's they doing on there? And actually, in fact, is a program. You can record onto your hard drive, record Posh Spice's voice and you see it all up on your computer, and you put it through this thing called a pitch corrector. So if you're not very good at singing or whatever, you set whatever track, whatever pitch control, what pitch the key, what key the song is in, and it goes along, listens to that particular audio track, and then corrects it. Now, but what people have done, which is what they've done with her. I'm not saying she can't sing or anything like that. Before I get
no, it's an effect. No, you're talking about the effect of it.
Around and kicking me. I'm saying it's the effect of it. which if you go a bit crazy with it, or tell it
If you
the
turn
wrong
all
key,
the knobs up, if you turn all the knobs up to full, basically, it has an effect like a vocoder, doesn't it?
yeah.
Well, they got there in the end, didn't they? In the 21st century, vocoders are still with us, unlike Scurvy or Cadbury's Rum and Raisin, who aren't.
In 1970, the idea of hearing these robot voices, like the sort of the cantina music from Star Wars, that's like, wow, it's so futuristic. But if you're looking back now, the idea of what we in 1970 thought the future was going to be like, with us all with our jetpacks and our wristwatch TVs, is so funny that it is in itself sort of quite charming.
Yeah, but and a lot of the records that get over now, particularly the kind of Daft Punk school of things, harks back to that, and that's why it's charming, and that's why it's got an appeal of its own.
We're retro.
Yeah, well, that kind of thing, because we're actually stumped for an idea of what the future's going to sound like now. Yeah. It's gone beyond what anybody can predict.
I think people like vocoder sounds, they like Moog sounds. They no longer want the future. We just want cutting edge nostalgia.
Sounds might have moved on. Drum sounds might have moved on. This might be out of date a bit, but the human voice is still pretty much the same, and we're still sitting around asking ourselves, how can we make this vocal sound more interesting? How can we blend it into the electronic sounds? The vocoder, in its broader sense, which is mixing and mutating sounds together, is a very powerful technique. And I've heard examples of drum beats vocoded with human voices, so you get a kind of singing, talking drum in an electronic sense that, blow your mind. So there's still a lot of mileage there.
When the king was buzzing round